is David Calabro. David Calabro is a PhD candidate in Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations at the University of Chicago. He is working on a groundbreaking and significant dissertation on hands and hand gestures in the ancient Near East and in the Bible. It's something you're actually going to want to own someday. He's currently teaching for us part-time at Brigham Young University in teaching Book of Mormon classes. We're pleased to have David Calabro.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. The topic of this paper is the form and meaning of a gesture mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, a handclasp exchanged between God and his human servant, which I refer to as the divine handclasp. The context in which this gesture occurs indicate that it had a place in ancient Israelite temple worship. Matt Brown, the honoree of this conference, had an interest in the divine handclasp and wrote an unpublished paper entitled The Handclasp, the Temple, and the King in August 2008, which he graciously shared with me shortly before his untimely passing. I am indebted to Matt for his insights, as will be clear in my discussion below. I offer my treatment of this topic as a tribute to Matt, in gratitude for his generosity, the enlightening conversations we shared, and his work in advancing our understanding of the ancient temple and its significance for Latter-day Saints. The divine handclasp has been interpreted in various ways. Mitchell Dahoud considers it a means of reception into the divine counsel and ultimately of assumption into eternal life. John Eaton posits that it refers figuratively to God's favor and aid rendered to the king during his reign. Both of these ideas are picked up by Otmar Kale, who further suggests that the divine handclasp was part of an ancient Israelite coronation ceremony, like those of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Implicit in many of the suggestions on the meaning of this gesture are assumptions about the gesture's form, such as the direction in which the participants face and whether the right or left hands are used. For example, both Eaton and Kale, in their discussions of the divine handclasp, refer to a Hittite relief showing a god leading a king, Tudhalia, by the hand. Note that the god's left hand grasps the king's right, and that the king faces the same direction as the god. Accordingly, the interpretations of Eaton and Kale presuppose that biblical references to God grasping the king's hand refer to leading by the hand. My purpose in this paper is to investigate what we can responsibly say about this gesture's form and meaning based on the biblical texts in which it is mentioned and on a comparison of these texts with Near Eastern iconography or art. I will begin by reviewing the 11 occurrences of this gesture in the Hebrew Bible and pointing out clues to the form of the gesture in these passages. Then I will review the evidence from iconography. After we've established the form of the gesture to the extent possible, I will conclude with some observations about what this implies for the meaning of the gesture. The divine handclasp is mentioned twice in the Psalms using the Hebrew verb achaz, to grasp. Psalm 73, 23 through 24, I am with you always. You have grasped my right hand. You guide me with your counsel and will afterwards receive me to glory. And Psalm 139, 9 through 10, I will ascend with the wings of dawn. I will dwell at the distant horizon of the sea. Even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will grasp me. The fact that the gesture in both of these passages is parallel to a verb of motion, hincha, to lead or guide or conduct, has led most interpreters to assume that the gesture is one of leading by the hand. This is where Kale and Eaton's perspectives come from. This is especially clear in Dahoud's translation of Psalm 73:24. Into your counsel, lead me. He spells it counsel with a C-I-L, as in the divine counsel. Lead me, and with glory take me to yourself. However, as will be shown below, comparison with other passages argues against this interpretation and causes us to reevaluate the meaning in these Psalms passages. Both Psalm 73 and Psalm 139 happen to have thematic and linguistic connections to wisdom literature. And from this perspective, one might suggest that hincha, rather than referring to physical motion, has the sense of instruct, as it sometimes does in Proverbs. The parallelism would then call attention not to the gesture's function of transporting the psalmist, but to its function as a means of imparting knowledge. The symbolism of God's hand as an agent of instruction can be found elsewhere in the Psalms and in other parts of the Hebrew Bible. As Matt Brown has also noticed, if we conflate the gestures in Psalm 73 and Psalm 139, as the contextual similarity between the two verses encourages us to do, we see that both God and the psalmist use their right hands. This would suggest that the participants in the gesture are facing each other, as we do when we shake hands. In contrast, leading by the hand, both in ancient iconography and in usual practice today, is similar to walking side by side, with one participant grasping the adjacent hand of the other. You can see this in Arabic countries. Men often, it's customary to walk holding hands, one leading the other, if they're friends. It doesn't have the same connotations as it would in our culture. We turn now to 4 passages in the latter part of Isaiah that describe the divine handclasp using the verb hechazik, to grasp. Isaiah 41:9, I who have grasped you from the ends of the earth and have called you from its corners and have said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not forsaken you. For the sake of time, I'm skipping down to Isaiah 45. Thus says Yahweh to his anointed one, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him, ungirding kings, and to open the doors before him, the gates not being closed. The context in these passages has to do with entering into a covenant, which includes an oath made by the deity. In Isaiah 45:1, the content of the oath is mentioned in connection with the gesture. The text might more clearly be translated, whose right hand I have grasped in oath, swearing to subdue nations before him. Again, this tends to invoke a handclasp between parties facing each other, such as when we clasp hands to strike a bargain. A 5th example belonging to the prophetic genre is found in Jeremiah 31. Behold, days are coming, says Yahweh, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their ancestors in the day that I grasped their hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which covenant of mine they broke, though I had become their husband, says Yahweh. This passage, like those from Psalms 73 and 139 above, has often been interpreted as referring to leading by the hand. However, the context here in Jeremiah 31 refers to a covenant, and the clause in question may be rendered as, I grasped their hand in oath, swearing to bring them out of the land of Egypt. Like the clause, whose right hand I have grasped in oath, swearing to subdue nations before him in Isaiah 45. Further, the language here in Jeremiah 31 is very similar to passages that describe raising the hand to make an oath, such as Ezekiel 20, verse 6. In that day I lifted up my hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. It is very likely I just lost my place. It's very likely that Jeremiah 31 refers to a handclasp accompanying an oath, an exchange between two parties who face each other, rather than a form of leading by the hand. And here's an example of what that might sort of look like from a relief from Nimrud. Finally, the verb tamach, hold, is used both in the Psalms and in Isaiah to describe the divine handclasp. In Psalm 41, as for me and my integrity, you have held me, you have set me before you forever. And again, I'll skip the rest of these. You can see them there, but we're pressing forward. In my judgment, the 11 passages quoted above, in which the verbs achaz, hechazik, and tamach are used, all describe one gesture. By examining these passages, one sees a web of contextual similarities that would make it difficult to separate them into different gestures. Aside from these general contextual similarities, one notes that the verb achaz is used to describe a handclasp only in the Psalms, and the verb hechazik is used in this way only in Isaiah and Jeremiah, while tamach is used in both the Psalms and the prophets. Given this distribution, one is tempted to consider achaz and hechazik to be equivalent verbs for the same gesture, each verb being limited to a particular genre. Once again, as Matt Brown has noticed, when we combine the examples with hechazik and tamach in Isaiah 41, we can see that both the right hand of God and the right hand of his chosen are mentioned. This, together with the oath-taking function that is present in some of the examples, suggests that both parties are facing each other and not walking side by side or one after the other. Now we turn to iconography. Many kinds of handclasps are found in Near Eastern iconography. In the Mesopotamian world, many cylinder seals feature what is known as a presentation scene, in which a deity is shown leading a worshiper or supplicant by the hand into the presence of another deity. A similar kind of scene is found in Egyptian art of the New Kingdom, featured on the walls of royal tombs, in temple reliefs, and in vignettes from spells 117 and 125 of the Book of the Dead. And let's see, so yeah, here's a temple relief from Karnak, a painting, tomb painting, and a vignette from the Book of the Dead, spell 117, with Anubis leading the deceased person into the presence of a god, and then Book of the Dead, spell 125, with the same kind of concept. In these Egyptian examples, the king or deceased person is inducted by one or more deities into the presence of another deity. Together with these induction scenes in Egyptian art, we find scenes in which the god who stands in front of the king and holds his hand faces him instead of leading him by the hand. And then there are various variations where they're mixed, where one or more gods are leading and then one god is facing the person. Otmar Kael compares the presentation scene in Mesopotamian art and the induction scene in Egyptian art to biblical passages that mention the divine handclasp. But ultimately, he rejects this connection because it is hard to reconcile with the Bible's monotheistic viewpoint. In addition, the kind of handclasp shown in the presentation and induction scenes does not seem to fit with the biblical descriptions in which right hands of both parties are used. We have already mentioned the Hittite relief of Tudhalia from Yazilikaya. This is the preferred source of comparison to the biblical divine handclasp for Eaton and Kael. However, once again, note that the god uses his left hand, not his right, to grasp the king's right hand. This does not match the biblical descriptions, in which it is clearly the god's right hand that is used. Further, we have shown that the idea of leading by the hand does not seem to be a major aspect of the biblical divine handclasp. Those who have sought iconographic parallels for the biblical divine handclasp have generally turned to the art of Israel's neighbors in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia. This is certainly better than, say, a comparison with Chinese or Greek art, yet it is not fully satisfactory either, since there are significant cultural and religious differences between Israel and the Near East and her Near Eastern neighbors. Therefore, we have good reason to ask whether there are any depictions of handclasps that are closer to the Israelite context. In fact, there are. A few cylinder seals from the Middle Bronze Age Levant, assorted scarab seals from the same period and later, and a Phoenician ivory fan handle. That may be a little too dark to see very well. Show a handclasp exchanged between a divine personage and a mortal. Interestingly enough, the parties of the gesture in all these instances are facing each other. I am not aware of any Levantine art showing the motif of leading by the hand, aside from some New Kingdom scarabs, which are more closely tied to Egyptian artistic conventions. One may, of course, object that the confronted figures in these Levantine examples are clasping adjacent hands, the left hand of the figure on the left and the right hand of the figure on the right. Thus, on the surface, this does not seem to fit precisely with the biblical descriptions. However, it is quite likely that Levantine iconography depicts the figures in this way for compositional reasons, so that each figure is presented to maximum advantage. And this is known to be a phenomenon in Near Eastern art in general. Often figures are depicted sort of so we can see all of their important body parts, and nothing is crossing or presented in a weird way from our viewpoint. In this, similar rearrangement of figures frequently occurs in Egyptian art as well, so that it is often difficult to tell which hand would have been used in a given ritual. In this case, we can guess that this kind of rearrangement is at work, since there is a discrepancy between what the artistic motif shows and how people actually clasp hands when they face each other in ritual contexts. Therefore, we may posit that what is shown for compositional reasons as a clasping of adjacent hands would have transpired in real life as a clasping of right hands. This small assortment of Levantine pieces thus provides a suitable parallel for the biblical descriptions of the divine handclasp. Now, in conclusion, let us see what our findings imply about the meaning of the divine handclasp in the biblical world. In the beginning, I mentioned that Eaton and Kale assumed that this gesture was a form of leading by the hand. However, our study shows that what we have here is quite different. Since the parties of the gesture would likely face each other, transport could not have been an integral aspect of this gesture, except in the limited sense of one party pulling the other inward. The psalmist's statement that God will receive him to glory in Psalm 73 can be understood in this latter sense. As we have seen, the idea of guiding in connection with this gesture in the Psalms may be interpreted in the sense of giving instruction. In Isaiah 45, it is likely a question of God granting access to his chosen rather than transporting him. The form of the gesture, with both parties facing each other and clasping right hands, is compatible with the idea that the divine handclasp was performative in nature. In other words, doing the gesture was like saying, I hereby ... or I now officially ... It was therefore similar to raising the hand with the palm forward, another gesture that is performed by deities in the Hebrew Bible and in Levantine art. Both the divine handclasp and the raising of the hand sometimes accompany oaths, as in Isaiah 45 and Jeremiah 31. However, the handclasp was different from raising the hand in that the former apparently imparted a special status to the recipient, a status like that of a privileged servant or close family member, as seen almost universally in the passages I've cited from Psalms, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. These conclusions are in harmony with Matt Brown's understanding of this gesture. Like Eaton and Kale, Matt believed that the gesture was part of a temple coronation ritual, and he further suggested that it was carried out between the king and a priest, who stood as proxy for the deity. The Phoenician ivory fan handle here, which shows a god or priest reaching across what appears to be a curtain or veil, it may not be that easily visible, but there is a definite vertical line separating where the god or priest's wrist is, coming right down. And that's not just a random scratch, that's definitely a purposeful line. Yeah. However, Matt's conception of the gesture was different from previous interpreters. He drew on late antique and medieval depictions of Assumption in which God grasps the hand of a mortal as if to pull him in. Here, too, Matt showed his characteristic insight, anticipating what I've been able to glean from the Hebrew texts and from Levantine iconography. Thanks.